It's 8:43 tonight, so you basically give me 15 minutes in here. And I've had a lot of conflicting requests. I've had people ask me to give a specific area of kind of Turkish policy, where we are. The elections have just happened. There's some really exciting developments there. People have asked me to reflect on how this all began, and then people have asked on some personal reflection. So let me see if I can try to combine all of those, because I speak really quickly. And hopefully all of you guys will catch up. If I need to speak in Turkish, just wave your hands, and I'll switch over very quickly as well. This is really exciting for me in a lot of different ways, in the sense that when this idea, kind of nascent idea began, I think 6 years now, we've had almost 10, I need to look for Caitlin to see how many actually we have. This was a crazy idea at the time. The idea that we would actually take a bunch of young foreign policy leaders and send them on the first ever trip that Truman had ever done, which Truman at that point did not have as many amazing people as we now see in hotel rooms. I think Emre referenced the fact that their iftars have gone from these big hotel rooms to small living rooms. We kind of went the other direction. Truman used to be all about kind of in the bars and in the living rooms to the big hotel rooms now, and I can't be prouder of that. But this is particularly personal and exciting to me, because there's no country in the world, I think the United States can count as both a closer, sometimes more difficult friend than Turkey. And I think the thing about what's amazing about this room right here is everyone can say they're a friend of Turkey. I didn't say they're friends of the government. I didn't say that they're friends of the particular leaders of any type, that they're friends of Turkey. Everybody that has been to Turkey and has experienced it for themselves, it's impossible to come back hating the people, the culture, the hospitality that we've all expected, we've all received, and particularly during Ramadan. Ramadan is one of my favorite periods of any holiday. I'm not Muslim, but this is a really important period. And what Emre referenced, and what every Muslim around the world, and what Turks in particular take seriously in terms of their level of hospitality, that we've all experienced going into their homes in Turkey, to just be embraced, regardless of people's political views and all the problems that we can talk about on the political side. This shows us the real future of the relationship, and it's going to be done by people like us. It's going to be done by future leaders who are able to look past political differences, the challenges of a situation, the difficulties of geography, and the bridging of worlds by doing it one person at a time, one meal at a time. And so for me, this iftar is particularly exciting, and it's gratifying to see that all of you have taken that journey along with us as we've been developing it. It certainly has not been easy. Standing right here, when people tweet this out, I already know what type of hatred I'm going to get. This Rumi Forum, which used to represent bringing people together, which brought inclusivity, was part of this nascent movement at the time that not many Americans had ever heard of, has exploded onto the national scenes because of the political dynamics of Turkey a couple years ago. Those of you that went most recently know exactly what I'm talking about in terms of both the Gulen movement, which is now called the Hizmet movement, that's done amazing things around the world, but also is very controversial in Turkey, and there's things that the government has accused. I was joking to many of my friends in the room who happen to be Turkey's most famous journalists, and they also are the people that have, their intellectual IQ has really enriched all of us in DC now, but it's sad because they're no longer able to report in Turkey, because when they do go back to Turkey, they will be arrested and charged as terrorists. This is not a political statement in any sense, because I think there are problems. All of us have mistakes. All of us have faults. There are things that the movement has done at different points of time about not being as open about who they are, etc., that I've been very critical of. I've pushed them in different ways. But I'm excited now, because every time I hear them talk, they are very clear about who they are. They don't run away from their values. And that's something that I think Turks in general can be proud of. This government that we are seeing now, and the elections that we saw a couple weeks ago, has led to a new dynamic. I think what's interesting about the West and about America that's always frustrated me is we always kind of chase headlines. And so the headline before the election was, who cares, the elections are going to be stolen, it doesn't matter. Turkey is going down the path of authoritarianism, and the new sultan of the region, Recep Tayyip Erdogan, is going to continue his rule. And immediately after the election, it's, yes, he's been defeated. The newsflash, I have to say, is he's not been defeated. He wasn't on the electoral ballot. He's still the democratically elected president for 3 more years. So no matter what happens between now and when the government is formed, or how quickly that government lasts or doesn't last, and what type of discussions we have in terms of party politics of secular opposition like the CHP or the nationalist MHP or the Kurds, the Surprise Party, this is going to be a difficult period for Turkey. And I think friends of Turkey are well cautioned to be both critical and skeptical of the euphoria that we see on the one hand, and also skeptical and cautious when we see the extreme pessimism. I always joke with my Turkish and Mediterranean friends in general that they kind of have these really high highs and low lows. maybe because I'm Anglo-Saxon and kind of the most waspy person you can ever find, I kind of stay right in the middle most of the time. And I think that's a lesson we all have to learn, because Turkey is one of the most amazing and joyous countries in the entire world, and it will make you feel like you're on top of the world, but it can also depress you and make you cry like no other country on earth. And so while we're watching 2 steps forward and 1 step back, this is Turkish history, unfortunately. And I think that's the history of all of our countries. Anytime we try to lecture other people about our history, about the past, I'm from the South of America, and watching what's happened over the last couple days and weeks, the issue of the Confederate flag is something that's, as someone from Richmond, Virginia, the home of the Confederacy, is deeply meaningful and moving to me. I never thought, even in my lifetime, I would see the transformation we've seen in the last week in the U.S., to see the Confederate flag being lowered down and seeing the flag of pride raised on the other hand. It makes me extremely proud of America. That doesn't mean that I can whitewash our history and the different things that are there. And as our president said when he went to Turkey for the first time and stood in front of an amazing rainbow coalition, in a very different sense of the word in Turkey, I might add, of generals and conservative Muslims and other folks, he was able to look out at this group that very rarely comes together. And he told them about acknowledging the past, and here standing as the first African-American president and reflecting on its role, looking at Turkey and saying, look, the scars of our past, the things from the past are not things that we can look past. It's the diversity, it's that areas that move us forward. I think one of the challenges in the U.S.-Turkish relationship has always been that Turkey has been seen as an instrument. It's always been a strategic relationship, and this is not to criticize any of my colleagues in the DoD or State Department or anything else, but we have to broaden those relationships. And I think that's where this type of dialogue, this type of discussion happens, because if there's going to be an end to the senseless violence that we've seen in the region, even the last couple of days, and particularly today, with Islamic fundamentalism, whatever term you want to use for that, particularly the so-called Islamic State. As we celebrate this holy month of Ramadan, there's nothing more non-Islamic than to go into a village and to put on someone else's uniform and to blow up your car. And whether or not that car came from the south or the north, we can have a discussion about that. I think the jury's still out in many ways. But that type of senseless violence, and particularly thinking about what the Sunni world is going through in this part of the world, there's no country that could be a better leader than Turkey. And that's always been the hope that I've had. I think all of us have that hope. But as we've watched what's happening internally in Turkey, there's a tendency to get depressed and say, well, it's not worth it. Turkey's difficult. They've been a very difficult ally the last couple of years. It's certainly been a difficult haul with Syria, with what's going on in Iraq. But at the same time, when you go to Turkey and you experience the hospitality in the Syrian refugee camps, when you go to the many places along the border, I know many of us have gone, we realize why we have to double down. We cannot run away from this ultimate responsibility we have as young leaders. And I'm really excited that Truman was the first. I think we can be proud of that heritage. And whatever people may say about any group that comes along, whether it's Rumi, if they want to call it Rumi, or the parallel state, these are our friends. And I think showing loyalty in these moments of time is particularly important. I think that's what I learned from my Turkish friends. And I hope we can always be there for one another, no matter the good or the bad times. And as we're thinking about the future and where we go as a community, a progressive community focused on national security, we have to speak to our own population. And there's a lot of bigotry, and there's a lot of folks that when they think of Islam, they think of Muslims, they think about terrorists. They don't think about a person who looks almost like me with a bad bowl haircut who walk into a church and kill the lives of 9 innocent civilians. And so I think when we realize that violence of that type in this country kills far more people than Muslim extremism, whatever term you want to use in the United States, we have to be very careful and cautious. And anytime I'm reminded of trying to tell somebody else what their faults are and pick a little splinter out of my brother's eye, I remember the log I have in my own. And I think each of us from our different faith tradition can appreciate what we're celebrating tonight. And while there are a lot of political problems ahead of us, I think it's going to be a rough road for the next couple of months, maybe even year. And I think the U.S. government is going to have to learn how to adapt. There's always been a problem in the U.S. in terms of dealing with Turkey because it doesn't fit into any nice boxes. Just like many of us in this community, we don't fit into a nice box. It's not just European, it's not just Middle Eastern, it's not just Muslim, it's all of the above. And if there's any country that I have faith in when I look at the students that I get to teach in Turkey, is there any country that I have hope in, it's the Turkish people, and yet I can be particularly depressed when I see the leaders that they have at different moments in time. It's not just a current government problem, it's an endemic problem in this particular region of the world. There's always been a great man leader for this part of the world, from Genghis Khan all the way through Ataturk to now, and I think one of the challenges, how do we take that and make it a truly people's-driven democracy? Because democracies are more than just elections, and more than just the ballot boxes. And the question is, how do we, as leaders in the United States that want to be able to represent and be the beacon on the hill, how can we inspire our colleagues across the waters as they do these amazing acts or do different things around the world, whether it's Gezi Park on the one side or whether it's the Syrian refugees on the other side. There's a lot to do, and we can't stand idly by, because I think what happens around the world, how closely interconnected we are, even the hashtags that we have trend so quickly in this world. It's the idea of how do we reach out and be our brother's keeper is particularly an important one. So hopefully I've filibustered enough to get us to that magical number, because I always am reminded when you've been fasting as long as a lot of our friends have, it's just, this is the most difficult time. I have a special place in my heart to realize, the way in which you honor your God and kind of the higher being out there. And I just want to make sure that all of us that are here can both, kind of respect you and ask that Allah Kabbaletz and that God will accept your fasting during this important period of time. So let me stop there. We can have a more fruitful conversation after everyone's had a chance to eat a little something. So I'll stop there. Thank you very much.